as you like. Yeah, it's all good. It's
Yeah.
all good.
So, hello everyone, and welcome to the podcast. Today we've got on James Cormack, a fellow Quest cognitive hypnotherapist and a dear friend of mine. James has offered to come on today to talk to us about anxiety. It's something that he's not only sort of specializing in his work, but something that he's also had an interest in personal experience with. Now, the podcast is everything to do with addiction, and anxiety is very relevant to addiction because there are many people who are using substances or other habits to as a coping mechanism for anxiety, and some people are actually unaware that they're doing that. So um, that's why I thought James's story would shed some light onto this. And anxiety is something that even us as therapists, we're not immune to it, right? And I think if there's one thing, and James, you might agree to this, if there's one thing that kind of sets us apart, is that we can identify it sooner, right? And that might sound a little bit funny to hear because, when most of us think about anxiety, we think about that feeling in our chest or those worry thoughts in our mind. But it's more multi-layered than that, isn't it? And I think we get this thing where we can identify it sooner because we work with so many people with anxiety that we come to realize just how multi-layered it is and how much of a unique experience it can be for people. And that's why I thought it is great to have you on, James, because you can talk a little bit about your own experience with it. And I think it's just a perfect example of how different anxiety can be to what we think or know of it.
Dennis, thanks, man. I mean, yeah, you've already put so much wisdom on the table there. I can start by then talking about my own experience, as you say.
Yeah,
I mean,
right,
yeah. So where I was at, and maybe where some people listening might be at as well, is a certain kind of manifestation, certain experience of anxiety, which is physical symptoms, most of all physical symptoms. So where it kind of began for me, when I first really realized I had a problem with, well, I didn't yet know it was anxiety. What I had was a load of physical symptoms coming up. So I had heart palpitations. I had times where I was lightheaded, times where I felt like I was struggling to breathe.
mm-hmm.
I had chronic pain that was escalating, and it was in my hands and my forearms. And as this pain was happening, what was going on was that I was, or as all these symptoms were happening, I was basically looking at all this. I was like, my body's falling apart. Like, what's wrong with me? Like, have I got a disease? Have I got some weird virus, right? Did I get sick when I was abroad that time? And, or is it some damage that happened here physically to my body? And that's kind of where I began, or at least where I really started to realize I had a problem. So the word anxiety wasn't even in the picture yet for me. And in fact, anything around the mental health wasn't in the picture at all for me. So, I thought I was physically ill. I happened to be abroad in Australia at the time. And, I started to see doctors. I saw a cardiologist for my heart. I got sensors put on. They were testing my heart, did an ultrasound of my heart. I went to a hospital. I did a lung capacity test. I, you name it. I saw a physio for the pain.
You had no idea that this was anxiety.
No idea. And so what happened was that this cardiologist in particular, right? So they did these tests, and then they said, okay, go away for a few weeks. We'll check the results. You come back a couple of weeks later, kind of waiting to hear what exotic disease I had, literally. And the cardiologist said, I've got good news for you. You are physically healthy. Your heart's fine. Also, the lung capacity was fine. All that. You're physically fine. Good news. I think it's anxiety. And when I heard that, it didn't make any sense to me. I rejected it outright. I got angry at her. And I, viewing myself as an anxious person or stressed in some way just didn't make any sense to me at all. And I thought what had happened was I literally thought that she had given up on trying to find out what physical illness I had. Yeah. Her tests weren't showing it. So this was like a cop out. That's actually what I thought in that moment. Yeah. So I felt angry. It was, so I started there, right? And what happened was, as time went on, I guess she planted a seed of sorts. And over time, I began to entertain like the possibility that I had, that what I actually had was maybe anxiety, right? And I just kind of explored it, and a few things came up along the path. And ultimately, I discovered, yeah, you know what? I had anxiety. All these symptoms are known. You could look this up. They're known symptoms of anxiety or stress, which are very much interrelated, kind of the same thing, or linked. And yeah, it was a mental health problem that was bubbling up as physical symptoms, what we call psychogenic symptoms.
Psychogenic. And some of those symptoms you would never put with anxiety, would you?
Yeah, exactly. And like people are walking, like most people experience, in fact, arguably everyone gets psychogenic symptoms from time to time. Yeah. But they can be so varied. And again, you could look this up, but you're talking everything from tension headaches, right, and migraines, chronic pain conditions, again, what was I saying? Lightheadedness and heart palpitations and all kinds of stuff. And what we're talking about is, again, psychogenic symptoms, meaning real physical symptoms, not stuff you're making up in your head, but real, actual physical symptoms, but which have a psychological cause or exacerbated by psychological things, right? So that's what psychogenic symptoms are. And a lot of people's experience of anxiety is, to begin with at least, mostly physical symptoms, psychogenic symptoms. And that's what my experience was. I was getting these random, seemingly unrelated physical symptoms coming up, and plenty more that I haven't mentioned. And I just thought, why am I ill physically? And I was not at all aware of any emotional discomfort. I didn't consider myself stressed. I look back now and I can laugh at that. I really can, because I can look back now with the clarity of hindsight and I can say, well, actually, I was abroad and I was living on my own. I didn't know anyone in Australia. I was in Australia. I could look and say, okay, there were these emotional struggles. I was struggling in these ways. And then I was fighting for control. I was actually, in hindsight, now I would maybe say I was a control freak, right? But I didn't at all see it that way. In fact, that's more of a recent way of viewing it for me.
So, putting aside the symptoms, would you say that's what was going on?
Yes, I would say that's what was going on now. But then I had no insight into this at all. In fact, I really thought I am someone who handles pressure well. And I mean, in ways I did handle pressure well. Yeah. I mean, I was good at pushing it down and getting stuff done, which, is one kind of, there's a place for that. But
sometimes that can be the problem, can't it?
Exactly. People who cope too well, as I've heard it phrased. Yeah.
So what would you say was going on? I mean, would you say there was like some kind of emotional detachment or dissociation?
Yeah, I would say that. I would say I was absolutely emotionally detached, dissociated from my emotional experience. I was, so there's a few words for this, but another word for it is I was in disunity.
Disunity.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit?
I can. So Yeah. So, right, let's see. So basically, to kind of sum it up, just to preempt this, if I'd heard this years ago, like if I'd heard this back when I was in Australia, I might have thought it was a load of nonsense.
Bit woo woo.
Woo woo, yeah. And I exactly. And I also, even if I was open and receptive to the idea, I wouldn't have really understood that it was relevant to me. So I just want to say that up front. But for anyone who's listening, I'll just invite you to kind of come to this with a beginner's mind, like an open mind, and just consider like interesting, like how might this be relevant? So basically, we've got our thinking mind, the in our head, kind of like when people say we're very much in our heads, we're in our thinking mind. This is the analytical side, this is intellect. And that's all good. Like, I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all, but I'm just saying that's one facet of us. But we do have another facet of us, which is our feeling, emotional, somatic selves, which is our body, basically. So we've kind of got our head and our body, our thinking mind, and our feeling, emotional side. And basically, and you may well have, it's likely that if you're listening that you've heard this said before, but like in our society, the reality really is that we're largely in our thinking mind most of the time, and our society generally doesn't, well, a lot of our society doesn't really engage with the feeling emotional side very much. It depends, obviously, people are different, but I was very much in that place where I'd gone through school, I'd gone through my education, gone through the world of work, and everything I'd ever done was done with my thinking mind pretty much. And it was, at times that was rewarded. Society would reward that, like, okay, that, pat on the back, like, good stuff. You're using your thinking mind well. And so I lived life with my thinking cap on all the time. But I what I had no idea of was that I was not in touch with my emotional feeling, somatic part, my body. Yes, I mean,
which is important,
which is very important.
Really important.
Yeah, like basically, okay, so I'm just thinking, how could I sum up why that's so important? I mean, for one thing, I mean that's which is it's important for many, many reasons. But if we're talking about anxiety, it's important because one of the things that happens in anxiety is that we've got emotions going on down here in our body. And if we're not in touch with them, then they can bubble up in unpleasant ways, including through psychogenic symptoms. That's one reason why it's really important, actually, that we start to get in touch with, in other words, start to build unity with our body, our emotional and feeling side. That's one reason. If we're talking about anxiety, another reason would be that, if we try and okay, so say you've got anxiety, right? And if all you've ever done is work with your thinking head, well, as you may have already experienced, right, with your thinking head, this is a meaning-making machine. It's like a computer in our head. But the thing is, it's able to tie us up in knots. We can actually get tied up in our own thinking, especially if we're trying to work our way out of anxiety. We end up often with a load of thought going on in our head, and along with our symptoms and anxiety, and then we end up fighting that thought with thought, and we just get it's very easy to get caught in circles like that. So that's another reason it's so important to get in touch with the body, is to avoid that.
A great quote comes to mind from Tommy Rosen: unprocessed emotions are buried alive.
Brilliant. Yes. So I had many emotions buried alive when I was in Australia. I had all kinds of stuff going on. I mean, like I'd never done any kind of therapy and stuff. I was big, by the way, I was really big on personal development. I'd certainly read self-help books. I'd certainly you know, like I was working very, very hard to try to achieve a better state of happiness, well-being, as well as material wealth, success, blah
That's a
blah,
lot of
right?
the coaching out on the market now, isn't it?
That's so true. That's
There are,
so
there are
true.
some as well that kind of say, sort of like their principles are that, you know, things that you feel or think they're just things that you're making up in your head, and to power through them and work through them,
Yeah,
you know, they completely just disregarding the somatic, you know, and it's just creating more of a psychosomatic disunity that you talk about. You know, you're just burying more and more emotions alive.
that's so true. And
And
you know, yeah, that's for me, what you just said is like a beautifully concise like summary. Actually, it's a very good point. It really, I mean, like, and you know, yeah, that. Okay, so that's like the big picture on what's going on in our
yeah,
society is, yeah, and not just coaching, but I suppose, you know, if you look at, okay, I mean, I don't want to go down a wormhole here. I'm not going to digress too much, but like social media, celebrity culture,
mhm,
you know, like just a lot of aspects of modern society that are like uh, constantly putting examples of often impossible perfection in front of
yeah,
us, and like we're getting sucked in to a desire to achieve that,
yeah,
and so, and in the process of doing that, we end up using our thinking heads to try and, you know, find the route to this
yeah,
perfection or whatever. And as you say, like in the process of that, in living in our head and being and trying to make everything okay and good in that way, we are inadvertently burying emotional life. That's exactly it.
yeah,
You know, it
yeah,
really is like in it, that's one of the big kind of picture things that's going on, I think, at the moment in terms
yeah,
of how many people are experiencing anxiety.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. There was I don't know, I don't think this is a digression, but there was this woman comes to my mind, the whistleblower for Facebook, and she was even saying that a lot of these social media platforms are kind of feeding people content that makes them anxious,
yeah,
because in a sense, people become addicted to that and they keep coming back through it,
yeah,
because it's,
absolutely.
it's a negative feeling, but it's a feeling nonetheless, you know, and
Yes,
people keep coming back for that, to feel something, you know, and
I
maybe this has got something to do with the disunity, right?
absolutely. Yeah, I think you're just bang on here. Like, um, to be honest, I've had even more thoughts about this. I mean, it seems to me that, so if you look at evolution, right, a process of evolution. So what happens is you don't need some like evil overlord like deliberately trying to exploit people and cause anxiety. You don't need that. All you need is companies that are incentivized to make money. They want to make money. So a company like Facebook wants to make money. Well, it turns out that, okay, they've got, you know, how can they make money? Well, as you've just outlined, and there's some really good books, documentaries, and movies out there. Basically, human emotion is what keeps people on that platform, right?
Yeah.
There's a really good Netflix documentary on this that I might have to look up the name of, but
Social dilemma.
yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
Social Dilemma. If you haven't watched it, highly recommend it. But yeah, you know, this is all part of obviously a big picture. It's like you don't need, it's not necessarily that there's anyone out there who maliciously designed it that way. It's just that if you, in our system, in the way the world works, this, you know, or our culture works, people want to make money. If you work at Facebook, and if harnessing people's emotions helps your company to make money and gets you the bonus at the end of the year, that's kind of like what you're likely to work towards.
yeah. Everything's
And
just set out that way, isn't it? We just seem to move towards that.
yeah,
You know, you got social media. Like, let's not just completely demonize social media.
no,
Even radio, man. You know, I went through a period where I was always listening to LBC. And
Right. Right.
and I just got to this point where I was always angry, because it
Yes.
is just a full day of people just moaning about things, isn't it? And a lot of things that are really just out of their control. We
Yeah.
can moan about it as much as we want. We don't have the final say.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so with you on this. And like, okay, I'm just thinking of anyone who's listening and wondering why we're talking about this when we're discussing anxiety. Well, I mean, anxiety is a complex thing, and there's a lot going on with anxiety. But generally speaking, if you're caught up in your head,
Yeah,
and if emotions like fear are leading you to overthink and then fight that thought with more thought,
yeah,
then basically that's kind of one of the main things that happens within anxiety.
yeah.
And
Excellent.
we're talking about the way in which a lot of things in modern life kind of poke the fear within us.
Hmm.
And even if we're not aware of the fear itself, it kind of leads us into, okay, lots of overthinking,
Hmm.
maybe coping mechanisms, maybe reaching for alcohol, maybe, like using
Absolutely.
substances, habits,
Mhm.
so
We did,
it's all linked to anxiety.
yeah. It's linked,
Yeah.
definitely. We digressed a little bit there. Let's bring it back. So
Fair.
disunity, yeah, that
Yeah.
that is what you would say was largely what was going on with you. So
Yes.
so then the journey out of anxiety must have been one that led you to unity. Yeah, would you say unity, self-awareness?
Yes, definitely. Unity. Well, okay, so it's all of those things. So, a really important piece in overcoming anxiety and many, many other issues, mental health, generally speaking, a way to improve mental health is through building unity with our emotional and feeling self, our body,
Mhm.
linking that mind and body, gradually discovering that that is, in fact, one system, which it is,
Yeah.
gradually building those links, gradually getting in touch with that emotion which has been buried alive so long,
Mhm.
which has been okay. So I'm gonna throw in an extra piece, I guess. The thing is, human beings are meant to feel the full spectrum of emotion. We are. It's okay, and it's normal, and it's what we're designed
Yeah.
for, to feel some fear, anger, sadness, grief, guilt, shame, as well as joy and happiness and love. All the emotions are natural and normal, and they're all there for a reason. Actually, they all evolved for a reason, all of it. um, but the challenge is that as human beings, we also tend to, for a bunch of reasons, including the way we're raised and the society we live in, we kind of dislike some of these emotions. Like we dislike the fear,
Mm.
and we grow up, and we often grow up into adulthood still disliking fear.
Mhm.
Maybe we're fearing the fear. We're afraid of fear.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why we then end up burying these emotions. That's why we end up in disunity. Our mind, basically, our thinking mind in our head says, I don't like that emotion, fear. I don't like that fear. So I'm
Is-
going to cut it off. I'm going to do something, one of a number of things,
Yeah.
to try not to feel that fear again.
Yeah.
And again, one of those things might be an addiction or combination of addictions, something like that.
Yeah.
That those are things that
All kinds of, isn't it? It's substances, habits, even just scrolling through your phone.
absolutely
You know,
that.
I sorry, I've cut you up there again. I mean, I became quite active on Instagram at one point, and then what I came to notice after a while, I mean, I haven't been on it for a few weeks now. What I came to notice is that I was just always on my phone. If I was eating, I'd pick up the phone, and it wasn't just to check my Instagram. It eventually, because there's so much interesting content on there, eventually it just kind of led to just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And then I caught myself doing this early on. A negative emotion would come, and I'd kind of reach for my phone and just scroll it away. And that's when I guess I was lucky enough to identify it quickly, and I thought, okay, have a break. So definitely we use it as coping mechanisms.
Absolutely. So I reckon, right, if we took what you just said, I think it's a beautiful example of unity and how it helps, right?
Yes.
So what you said there is there was and by the way, a lot of people listening and me myself, I've personally experienced this and continue to at times. And okay, so what you said is there was some negative emotion, and then I noticed that then I found myself kind of there on the phone.
Yeah.
For you to have that insight, oh, right, there was negative emotion. And then I was on my phone. Look at that. Well, you had to have unity with the negative emotion in the first place. You needed
Yeah.
to feel that there was negative emotion there.
Yeah.
And right. So, where a lot of people are at with addiction at the start, I think, is they're looking at their phone a lot, or they're drinking, reaching for alcohol, or whatever substance or habit it is, and they're only aware of that to begin with. And so it's in that place, it's like, well, the alcohol's the problem, so I need to take that away. Like that's it, right? um but what's going on always is there's some deeper level of, well, as you said, negative emotion
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And
I think so too. Yeah.
yeah, but like when we're in disunity, like most people a lot of the time, when we're not yet aware that that emotion's there, and we can't deal with it. But as we build that unity and we go, oh, look, there's that negative emotion. Oh, there was that negative emotion, and then I was drinking.
Yeah.
Then I was doing the behavior. Well, now what you can do is you can start to work with the negative emotion there.
Yeah.
I mean, exactly.
It's interesting that you say that, actually, because a lot of the inquiries that I get through, yeah, in the sort of subject bar of the email, it's not uncommon for it to say addiction and anxiety, yeah,
Okay.
drinking and anxiety, cannabis and anxiety. And a lot of the time, what I've come to realize is that these people, and they're forgiven for thinking this, they believe that it's the substance or the addiction that's causing the anxiety, whereas it's actually the other way around. And you can definitely see disunity here as well.
I think that's such a good point. And I totally agree. Like forgiven for thinking that. Like, don't get me wrong, there's no it's easy to see it that way. It's easy to go, right, so the addiction is the cause of anxiety. But yeah, I'm totally 100% with you. As you explore that, it's going to be the other way around. It's going to
Yeah.
be the other way around.
So how important was unity for you, and this self-awareness for you coming out of anxiety, or learning to manage it, or to break through it? How
Yeah,
important
I
is
mean,
that for you?
yeah, like, so I mean, crucial. So what I'd say is, let's see.
And how has it changed things for you? What's changed since?
Yeah,
I see
it's
that
changed a lot of
smile.
things. Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
to
I mean,
begin?
absolutely. Like, so I guess let's see how I'm thinking about the best way to answer that. I mean, to start with, I'd just say that some of my earlier therapy, it
Yeah.
wasn't that I knew I was building unity. I didn't know that was what was happening, but it was happening. My early therapy was really, really helpful. And what it did was, like, at times in the therapy, I would connect with some emotion within myself,
Mhm.
and that would feel like a weight had been lifted off, and that would often relieve things, and I'd often leave that session and my symptoms were reduced and stuff like that. I didn't know it at the time, but I was actually starting to get dipped into my emotions and feelings, and I was just starting to build unity. As time went on, as I really began to understand this and learn about unity, the therapy got more and more body orientated, and involved more and more, like, in contact with our emotion and feelings. I mean, as I did that, it, like, opened new doors. The therapy went further than my earlier therapy. It was like a deeper kind of release of the emotion that had been buried alive,
Yeah.
as you
Yeah.
quoted. And what happened was, yeah, I mean, a lot of things have changed, and frankly still continues to change for me. But I mean, the whole way I go through life is now different, and much less stressful, much less tense,
Hmm.
um, leads to far less anxiety,
Hmm.
far less tendency to go into a behavior unconsciously.
Hmm.
And I'm still learning, and I'm still going further in that direction.
Yeah.
It's really changed how I go through life. Yeah.
I hope it's a journey that never ends.
Yeah, I so agree. It will never end.
Because
Yeah.
it puts you on that journey, doesn't it?
Yeah, it so
And I
does.
know a little bit about yours, and that's why I asked, um, because I know you're a thinker, aren't you?
I can be. I
Yeah,
so
well,
can be.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I know through experience as well, through clients, that some who are real thinkers, and they just find it more difficult to sit with themselves, and to have that somatic experience, because even some of the stuff that we do as cognitive hypnotherapists is, it leans more towards feelers, and some is more for people who are in their head, and it's just it becomes more difficult. It can be more challenging in the beginning to use some of the stuff that's more sort of feeling,
Yes,
and sometimes it's just a shame, because you really want them to experience that.
I
And I
get you.
think this is kind of a path that you went along as well.
Very much so. I mean,
I can
like,
kind of imagine you in your training when they're
yeah,
trying to do that stuff to you, and it's just not working.
definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. For real. I mean, exactly. So we're talking about how uh, different people have different sensory modalities, right? As we talk
Yeah.
about in cognitive therapy, and some people are already feelers, and that they kind of quite readily go into their body. They may still, fair enough. Yeah, and they may still have more buried alive emotion to work through,
Yeah.
but they're already quite in touch with their body and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
And then you've got the people like me, especially going back to Australia, where we are very in our heads, very thought orientated, and have very little to no contact with our emotional feeling side. And yeah, so the thing is that both sides, and then that you've also got people who are kind of more visual and more
Yeah.
auditory and so on, but all these different kind of groups, like basically what they've all got in common is everyone can benefit from further exploration into the other modalities that they're not so big on, so that the thinkers can benefit from experiencing more feeling. The feelers sometimes will benefit from a bit more what we call top down, like through your thinking
Yeah.
work, depending. Um, and yeah, so my journey was again from a place of absolutely no awareness of any emotional problems or stress related issues at all psychologically. A long, well, not that long actually, really a journey, but like a really interesting journey of getting more and more in touch with my body. In the early days, therefore, the therapy I did was more cognitive, more mind orientated. And then as I opened up into emotion and feeling, then went into more body led or somatic emotional stuff in therapy. And yeah, and where I'm at now is a bit of both, top down, mind first, bottom up, body first.
Both are quite
Yeah,
important.
if that made sense.
Absolutely, man. And so if there's someone watching this now, and I'm sure there might probably be somebody watching this now who's kind of got that disunity as well, might even be unaware of it.
Yeah,
What advice would you have to them of what they might be able to do, or how they might be able to identify it?
great. Yeah. Well, okay, let's see. So if I was speaking to those people, First thing I'd say again is something I said earlier. Firstly, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to recommend and encourage you to have what we call a beginner's mind. So basically, you
Beginner's
put
mind.
aside what you already know, and you may know a lot. You could maybe even have a background in psychology or therapy. I don't know. You can put that aside for a moment, and we'll just come to this with an open book. What I'd invite you to do is to notice a few things. Notice whether you have a history, in particular, if you have a history of any chronic physical symptoms for a start, because that's pretty common actually. And again, where I was at, chronic pain, or other chronic physical symptoms, that's often going to be like the first flag that says, okay, so like chronic physical symptoms are very correlated, like that they commonly happen for people who are very in their head and have this emotional disunity we're talking about. So if you've got any chronic physical complaints, just notice that. That's almost like something you can check off and notice. Another thing I'd say is, I could ask, how readily do you feel your emotions? How much do you feel your emotions? In particular, if we took something like anger or fear, if we, how much do you actually feel that? Now, when I say feel, I mean literally in your body, somatically, like sensations in your body. Because in the past in Australia, I probably would have said to you, what I exactly would have said is I think that I feel fear sometimes. I think I feel anger sometimes, although I generally am pretty cool-headed. Like that would have been my response then. But the thing is that I was very, very in touch with my body. So I wasn't feeling that somatically. I wasn't actually feeling these sensations in my body. I was just like, I was only experiencing that through my thinking mind.
Yeah.
Okay. So emotions, believe it or not, for the people who are very thoughty, right? Believe it or not, your emotions really do happen in your body. It's an actual sensation, a physical sensation in your body. I genuinely didn't know that. I genuinely didn't know that back in Australia. And if you hear that and it doesn't, and you also aren't really aware of physical sensations in your body and these sensations of these emotions in your body, then there's another flag, a little sign as well. Like maybe you're in disunity. What else? I'd say, how much do you use your rational mind to try and make everything in your life okay? So back in Australia again, or actually in many years to come, even as a therapist in sort of early stages of being a therapist, if I reflected on that question, I'd say to you, like, well, what I would think is, it works well for me. Yeah, I do use my logic a lot. I use my mind to try to do things like be successful in my career, be successful in life, create the conditions for happiness and well-being, stuff like that. I think about this a lot. I've read a lot of books. I've studied it. I do a lot of strategizing, a lot of planning, stuff like that. Well, there can be a place for that, but generally speaking, consider, how much effort that actually takes. Like if we're actually using our thinking mind to try and build that ideal life for ourselves, that's a lot of work. And I would invite you to just start to consider, is there, how much tension is that bringing into your life? So a lot of people, like, again, me, especially in the past, and I'm still on a journey out of this, frankly, who are very thought orientated, because that's the way that we've always interacted with life. Like we just quite naturally, very, 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 very thought heavy in trying to build that ideal life. We're often perfectionists, or goodists is another one. Whether that's trying to be good morally and ethically, but also good at what you do. You know, are you a perfectionist? Honestly, are you a perfectionist? Are you a goodist? Do you do a lot of work to try and create the ideal life yourself? That's another flag for sure.
Mhm.
Like these are like general patterns that that come up when people are in disunity. Generally speaking, the more that we build unity, the more that we get in touch with our body and emotions, we start to go through life in different ways, and ways which are actually not only healthier and involve less stress and less tension, but even which work better for us and actually yield more success than when we were trying to use our thinking mind to craft that perfect life, you know, in those perfect circumstances.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was a long answer, but there's a bunch of
No,
things, you know, if that resonated, then
yeah,
consider, you know, disunity.
absolutely.
Yeah.
What about sort of people who do use substances or other habits as a coping mechanism for this? Is that like a sign of disunity as well? Is not, if you do have a feeling or an emotion, not sort of letting it express itself, not sitting with it to see where it comes from, and just sort of pushing it aside with a substance, or burying it with a substance or another behavior.
Yeah, great. That's a great point. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. So, you know, what's going on there? Basically, what's going on there is our mind doesn't want to feel that emotion. So there's some negative emotion and it's buried alive under the surface, as you said, and our mind doesn't want to feel it. So just to make this clear, I just reamed off a few ways in which the mind tries to avoid emotion. You know, again, like things like perfectionism, that's one way in which the mind's actually trying to avoid pain, have more and more pleasure in life. You just provided another like major way, you know. Addiction, it's a way that the mind's trying to get away from that emotion, which is disunity, not being in touch with the emotion, you know. 100%.
And so, as a cognitive hypnotherapist, the important question is, how can you help? What does cognitive, so whether you're in disunity, or whether you're fully aware, you're conscious of your anxiety, you're feeling it, you're feeling it, you've got anxiety, how do you help? How does cognitive hypnotherapy help?
So firstly, this will vary from person to person. But you know, okay, to give a really big picture, let's see.
Yeah, take your time, man, go as long as you want.
Cheers. Yeah, I mean, to give a really big picture on this. So what we're saying is that we've got unconscious stuff running the show, whether it's addiction, whether it's anxiety. There's going to be emotion and thought that's beneath the surface, and that's what's driving it, basically. So that's like the big picture in a nutshell, I guess. Cognitive hypnotherapy is a really powerful way that we can process, release, and let go of the thought and emotion that's been causing these problems, and to replace it with thought and emotion that better serves us and sets us free of these problems.
uh,
That's the big way.
I couldn't have put it better myself.
Cool.
That's the dreaded question, isn't it?
Yeah, I know, right? It's the elevator question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I just throw into this as well. I just want to add to that. The thing is, right, that I know you know this, but a lot of people listening won't yet. The thing is, like, when you've got a problem like anxiety or addiction or depression or other mental health issues, it's okay and it's totally understandable that what you want to do is you want to fix that. You want to get rid of these problems. And again, treating the thought and emotion that's been causing it is bottom line how you do that. But the thing is that there's a hidden opportunity as well. Hidden opportunity is that as we treat that thought and emotion, it doesn't just help us to break free from the old problems, but it also opens a door to personal growth, to unprecedented personal growth, and movements towards your best life and your best self. And that's what I say to everyone. Like I know that you've got these challenges in front of you right now, you know, all these problems and these difficulties and pains. But the thing is that the obstacle is the way, to quote one of our like favorite books, I think.
Yeah.
You know, the obstacle is the way. Like that obstacle, that problem, as you work through that, you're not only able to set yourself free from it, but you actually open a door to really like growing way beyond that as well.
Yeah.
Just to say that as well.
Good. Brilliant, man. Yeah, so I know I asked you this before as well. What I would like from you know, all the guests who come on is maybe to give, you know, either a technique or a piece of advice for free, something really useful for people.
Yeah. Well, so I would say that understanding thought really is so important. Okay. So I'm going back to what I just said.
Yeah.
So if you've got a problem like addiction or anxiety or a lot of other mental health challenges and things like that, thought and emotion is what's running the show. Thought and emotion, unconscious thought and emotion to begin with, is why those things are happening. So one of the most powerful things you can do, one of the most helpful things you can do, is to understand, first of all, the true nature of thought. So where a lot of people are when they first begin this kind of journey is that they've got thoughts spinning around their head like flakes in a snow globe, and they're caught up in thought, and the thought could be things like negative thinking about themselves, right? I'm not a good person, or I'm not successful, I'm a failure. It could be thoughts like, why did I do that behavior again? Why did I take substance again? Why am I feeling anxious? It doesn't make any sense. There's no reason, blah, right? So this is all thought. Mm-hmm. And this is all thought, which takes us down into a lower kind of state. So very often people at this stage in the journey, their head is spinning with these thoughts like a spinning snow globe. And then what they're trying to do is they're trying to make the snow globe settle. They're trying to make it calm down. They're trying to make the thoughts settle and calm down so they don't feel as bad, so then the head's not full of so much stuff, right? But the problem with that is that what they are accidentally doing, where we've all been at times, is trying to fight thought with thought. So the head's spinning with thought, negative thought, unhelpful thought, and then they're going in and they're wrestling with that. Like, no, I am a good person for these reasons, or well, it's not my fault, blah blah blah, or anything. Like, you're going and you're having that. When you slow it down and really notice it, you're kind of getting into a shouting match with yourself or with your own thought.
I'm picturing the image I'm getting is adding more snow into the snow globe.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely that. Yeah. Adding more snow into the snow globe, shaking it up more.
Yeah.
With the best of intentions, what you're trying to do is you're trying to resolve this spinning snow globe of thought, but unfortunately, fighting thought with thought is only making things worse.
Yeah.
And fighting thought with thought is often where things escalate and we feel even worse, right? So there are two things I'm going to say about that. The first thing is that what we need to realize is that thought, which is the flakes in that snow globe, actually isn't us. It's just something that our mind does. Okay, it's a phenomenon. So it's like when I look outside and it's raining outside, that's a phenomenon. It's just like happening out there.
Yeah.
Well, similarly, I can look at my own thought doing its thing. Like, I'm not good at this. I'm crap at this. I shouldn't have done that, blah. It's a phenomenon. It's something my mind is doing and producing, just like rain clouds going by and raining. It's just happening. It's this thing that, so I've got this pink wrinkly object in my head, as I say, right?
Yeah.
And it's producing this phenomenon. It's producing thoughts. It's just churning them out all the time. So the first thing is, that's not me, actually. You are not your thoughts. Thought is something that's happening. In fact, it's not you. Now, the more deeply we understand that, the more it actually takes the power out of that thought. Because the thing is, like, when we get sucked into our thinking, when we're maybe really maybe we're imagining what's going to happen tomorrow, the thing that's going to happen tomorrow, and I'm getting really nervous about it, and I imagine it going wrong, I'm imagining myself screwing up on that, on that date or in that meeting or whatever. What's happened is I've got sucked into that snow globe, and I'm caught up in the thought, and it seems so real, and now I'm on a roller coaster. Now I'm experiencing fear and anger and anxiety. I'm caught up in it. But if I understand and if I remember, well, hang on a second, like, this is actually just my thought right now. It's that phenomenon. It's that thing my mind's doing.
Yeah.
It's not me. It's not real at all. It's this phenomenon. It's the flakes in the snow globe. It's just thought. It's just a series of images and imagined experiences that my mind is producing.
And
right?
It's not Christmas. Why have you got a snow globe?
Exactly that. Exactly
It's
that.
a false belief that's driving the snow globe.
It's
Probably
not Christmas.
emotion,
Boom.
isn't it?
Sorted. Yeah. Yeah. So, like, the more that we can understand and remember, hang on, this is just my thought. Well, that takes power out of the thought.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes realizing, hang on, that's just my thinking, will actually take all the power out, basically. And sometimes we'll be left calm and we'll have completely broken free of the thought. Other times it won't do that, at least immediately, but it will take some power out. We'll at least be able to recognize, okay, I'm in this, I'm in this state right now, and my thinking's not helpful, and the snow globe's spinning, my mind is spinning right now. But it's just my thought. It helps you get some healthy distance from that thought. Helps you get some space from it, takes some power out of it. Okay, that's the first thing. Just and all there is understanding. It's just thought. It's not me. It's not real. It's just thought. Because the second thing I'm going to tell you is that there's a thing that you must understand, and it can set you free from this. And that is that thought is a self-correcting system. So when we're in these states where our mind is spinning and we've got all this unhelpful stuff going around in our head, all these thoughts, like that spinning snow globe, well, just like a snow globe, if you set that snow globe down on the table and leave it, it will settle on its own, sometimes faster than other times, but it will settle. It always settles on its own. It always settles. The flakes will slow down, they'll sink. And what will happen is you'll get more and more space, clear space at the top of that snow globe. And that's clarity. That's clearness in your head. Thought is a self-correcting system. If we fight thought with thought, we're kicking that snow globe up again. But if we learn better and better to leave it be, it will settle and it will clear. So to go through those two things again, sometimes we've got thoughts spinning around in our head. It's really unhelpful. And our instinct is to go in there and try and fight it, try and reason with it, try and argue the case that actually, like we're fighting. Instead, firstly, if we understand and remember, hang on, that's just my thinking. Power's taken out of it. You've got perspective. Now you're not sucked into that thought, but you're more of an observer. You're almost observing that your mind's doing this now. Secondly, it's going to self-correct. The more that you can allow that thinking to self-correct on its own, the sooner it will settle. The sooner that you will feel better. Yeah. Sometimes it'll happen really quickly. Sometimes it'll take a while. But the thing is, this is such a fundamentally important understanding of the true nature of your thought. And it can, there are depths of understanding of this. I've told you this in a few minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and that can yield immediate benefit.
Mm-hmm.
But this is like, I dare say, a lifetime's journey, or a long journey that you can go on of more and more deeply understanding this. And what it does is it leads to a healthier and healthier relationship with your own thinking.
Because there are different levels to it, aren't there?
Absolutely.
You get a client who comes in for anxiety about a certain thing, and then we can get clients who are just anxious.
Yes. A good
And
point.
and yeah, and if somebody comes in and they've got anxiety, they're anxious about a certain thing, then it's a lot more straightforward to work with. But sometimes you get clients who are anxious people and always have been. Then it's more multi-layered, isn't it?
Yeah, it can be.
And it's
I
like you
mean,
say, it's a longer journey, but it's a good journey. It's not that it's a difficult and traumatic journey. It is one of self-discovery, and it is one of personal growth.
absolutely. Yeah, which can yield massive benefits, again, beyond just breaking free of addiction or anxiety and into really becoming your best self. I mean, yeah, I would say there's plenty you can say about anxiety. But if someone is generally an anxious person, as they would say, I mean, one thing it can point to is a certain relationship with their own thinking, where they're getting sucked into their thinking a lot. They're getting pulled onto that roller coaster of their own thought. And so I would say, for some of those people, what we just talked about with the snow globe can be one of the most important things.
Can be. What if I'm just wondering, James? If so, I'm just thinking. I'm a listener, and I'm listening to this, and it's great advice. Yeah, let the snow globe settle, right? Because some of the thoughts that we think about are not really relevant. Yeah, we stress over unnecessary things sometimes, and we get anxious about them. What if you are going through something in your life that the thinking is relevant, the anxiety is relevant?
Okay.
That snow globe method, will that, how will that help? How can you use that?
Yeah. Okay. So, okay, I think this will answer your question, but you can guide me. The main thing there, right, is the thought helpful? Is it helpful? Because the thing is, you know,
That's a very powerful question.
right,
Very powerful.
right,
Is the
and
thought helpful?
is it helpful? Because
Yeah.
the thing is, I'm speaking firsthand. I'm drawing on my own experience here, which is ongoing, by the way. I'm not saying I've like transcended all of this, but the thing is, um, so you could be in a situation where, as you just put it, your thought might be relevant. So, like, I don't know, a situation with work. I've got a problem at work, and my thought is spinning around trying to solve that problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if we step back and we go, okay, first of all, again, right, so that's just thought. So my thought is spinning around, and it's a self-correcting system. And if I go in and fight that with more thought, I'm going to get in more of a mess. Okay, first of all, so we've got a bit more distance there. Now, if we consider, is this helpful right now? Well, very often the answer will actually be no. For example, is it 10 p.m. and you're going to go to bed? Like, is it helpful to really think about this right now? Or here's another one. You've been mulling over this problem all day, and you feel kind of stuck. And I mean, your instinct might be to keep fighting thought with thought there. But you see, what if you let that settle? What if you let that snow globe settle now? Because as it settles, you're going to get some of that clarity and clear thinking back.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff you've been mulling over all day will settle into place.
You're going to get a clearer view of the landscape.
Yeah. So is it really, honestly, well, not honestly, but like looking at as best you can, is it helpful to keep on mulling over and fighting thought with thought and being in that snow globe, as I've been in there all day? Or actually, is it now worth, best I can, remembering, okay, that's just a load of thought, it will settle and self-correct on its own. And then literally, if, like going for a walk, taking some time off, doing something else and allowing it to settle in the back of your mind. And like, this advice can often seem so like so simple, and
Can be
almost,
that simple.
it can be, that's the thing, right? Like some of the most profound understandings that can actually really set you forward on your journey of overcoming anxiety and addiction will actually seem, profoundly simple, almost irritatingly simple at
Yeah,
times.
yeah,
Yeah, but in fact, the most profound stuff is simple. So, like, if you're listening to what I just said, you might be thinking, I already know that, or I do that, and that doesn't really, I don't know, does it change much? Well, I'd say to you, you probably in your life already have had some level of understanding of this. You probably had some degree of awareness that if you go for a walk and then you come back, you'll often feel better, have a clearer mind, and
yeah,
some of the thoughts you were dealing with will often have settled into place.
yeah,
So you may have noticed that, and it's even the kind of advice people give each other from day to day. But the more that you understand that, the more that you understand the true nature of thought, the more powerful this gets, and the more skilled you get at like navigating this whole thing and not getting caught up in thought, fighting thought with thought, and enabling thought to settle when it serves you best to let it settle, and remaining more and more in that observer position of understanding it's just thought, like less and less sucked in and riding the roller coaster, more and more watching the roller coaster happen.
mhm.
So, like, this is a whole like way of going through life that, I've given you like a really basic, brief kind of explainer. But like, what we're talking about here is something that just goes deeper and deeper, gets more and more powerful, and it leads to better and better mental health, and like your effectiveness in something like a work
Yeah,
situation,
yeah,
relationship, anything. So it's both very simple and very profound, and probably infinitely deep at the same time.
yeah, yeah.
If that, yeah,
Absolutely, man.
yeah,
So basically, what you're saying is get some therapy.
yeah. I'm saying that. Get some therapy.
Yeah. So yeah,
Anyone
definitely.
can benefit. Anyone can benefit, for real. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, I
yeah,
completely agree with what you're saying. And sort of interrupting that pattern has been so useful for me as well. There have been times, especially through lockdown and after lockdown, you kind of fall into a bit. No, I'm not going to say rut, but I've had times where I've kind of realized that I was getting a little bit anxious as well, because I'd spent so much time at home just working,
yeah,
wanting to succeed and just working. And there was a time, I think I was working on one particular project, and just got stuck with it, and fell into this cycle of just thinking and thinking and thinking, and just thinking, trying to solve something with
right,
the same thought process,
yeah, yeah,
trying to do the same thing and get a different result.
absolutely,
and
yeah,
and it was actually it's funny actually, because it was my neighbor from across the road who said to me, she said, "Are you all right?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I'm fine. Why?" She said, "We're a bit worried about you." And I was like, "That's strange,
mm,
And I said, "Why?" She said, "You're not really leaving the house much." And I was under the impression that I'm at home, man, and I'm working hard, and I'm doing it and I'm building it. And when she said that, I thought, oh man, well, I thought maybe she's right. Maybe maybe I should go out a little bit. And I thought, I'll go for a walk in the forest. And I went for a walk in the forest, and it was so, it just made me feel so different, man. It was so profound, the change. And I'd come home, and that thing that I was struggling with and overthinking that was making me anxious was just, the answer was right there, man. It was just in the walk in the forest, trying not actively not thinking about that thing.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, exactly.
Gave me the answer.
So that you allowed that snow globe settle on its own, which
That's what happened. The snow globe settled, and I got a clearer vision of my inner and outer landscape, and the answer was there.
This is it. Now, I'm betting a lot of people listening will be like, well, yeah, I've like, or some people might think, yeah, I mean, sometimes I've had this kind of thing, but anyway, but this is so important. Like what you just shared is like, that's a window into how your thought actually works. Thought actually works. When we are used to going through life in a thought heavy kind of way, or when we're in a state, especially in a state of fear, and we're a bit hijacked, and we're a bit already in the snow globe, and maybe we're already fighting thought with thought, it can seem, from that perspective, it seems like what you should do is to keep fighting thought with thought, to keep wrestling with this thing.
Keep thinking,
keep trying to find the answer. Yeah. And smart people, their mind keeps, and this is something like, I continue to realize this more and more, frankly, myself, like the mind is a clever thing, and it will continue to bait you, not maliciously, but like just the way it ends up working is it will keep leading you back into fight more thought with thought, to keep just staying a bit longer, keep thinking this one through. And it will also, as someone else said to me quite recently, your mind will tell you and make it seem like it was the solution to all your past problems, and that it is the solution to all your future problems. Like, just think it all out. Your mind is very good at making all your past achievements, or many of them, look like they were achieved through thinking through them and being analytical and so on. But when the thing is, though, in reality, like what you just described is a perfect example that when we look closely and really notice these moments, there's something else going on, which is, again, that thought is actually this spinning snow globe. And and fighting thought with thought is just, it's just, in practice, it's never really the way forward or the best way forward. And
it's true. Thinking about it, I mean, some of my best work was done when I wasn't working. Some of my best ideas came to me when I wasn't thinking, when I wasn't trying. It could be in a forest walk, it could be while taking a jog, or while in the gym.
Absolutely. And I'm still learning this. Like I'll put my hands up. Like, I can do.
Same here.
I can integrate that more into my life for sure. Yeah. I'm definitely on a learning curve with that. But what I will also say is, picking up on another thing you mentioned earlier, how did you feel after that? You felt less anxious, in your words.
Yeah.
Now, an alternative,
free.
Yeah.
Free. I felt free.
Yeah. And so, first of all, right there, we've got an example of, anxiety means a lot of things, but this is one important way in which we can break free from anxiety. But then, what could an alternate person in the same situation have done? Well, they could have reached for alcohol. They could have overeaten. They could have done a load of different things, which we call addiction, in order to like, oh man, like, I'm really anxious and nervous about this whole work thing, and I've been thinking with it all day. I'm gonna drink a load of beer now. And that was another path. And instead, you took that path, you went out for that walk and you felt so much better, freer, less anxious. You also
Yeah.
did not do a coping mechanism like an addiction. I mean, it's the same thing. It's like,
yeah, you know, it's just such a normal thing, isn't it? I mean, even if you're not aware, you know, that you've got, maybe you haven't got an addiction, let's not label it. You know, maybe you're somebody who just comes home and you drink 1 or 2 glasses of wine a night. Yeah. Or you just come home and you just kind of plant yourself in front of the TV. You've got the TV on and you're just scrolling through your phone. Yeah. Let's not label it an addiction, but could be a coping mechanism. You know, it could be a coping mechanism. I think who was it? With Hugh, we used to do this the reset. We did Sober 2018, where all the participants, we picked one thing that we're gonna completely abstain from for a year. And I think we did a 3-month one as well. And I can't remember. I mean, there were people who picked, you know, there were people who picked alcohol, there were people who picked junk food, there were people who picked coffee, right? Something as small as coffee, something as small as sugar, right? Just to quit that. And they came to realize within that 90-day reset of how much they were using it as a coping mechanism.
yeah.
And just by sort of quitting, you know, not drinking, you know, 4 or 5 coffees a day, how much raw emotion emerged, you know? And it's just these things that we use as coping mechanisms. That, you know, a lot of people, when we hear addiction, we think of, you know, heroin, cocaine, you know, we think of alcohol, you know, but, you know, somebody who drinks into oblivion, you know, it's not always the case, man. We're using these things as a coping mechanism for, you know, for feelings, you know, and we all do it, man. Even I, you know, I wouldn't say I've achieved, you know, complete autonomy. You know, sometimes I fall into, you know, the sugar trap.
Same here. Like I really, you know, I don't know about like a yogic master or something, but other than that, like we're all doing this.
We're all doing it. We're all doing
Yeah.
it. And the
Yeah.
important
At
thing is to
times.
be able to identify and be honest, right? Am I using this thing as a coping mechanism for something? And a lot of the time, that's anxiety, especially with everything that's going on in the world now. There is so much negativity in the world. And even if we don't pay attention to it, we're constantly seeing it, man. And, you know, if it's not climate change, it's politics. If it's not politics, it's the pandemic. If it's not the pandemic, it's gas prices, ULEZ, you know, all these things that are going on, just that the pressure's just piling and piling, you know, and it's just creating this anxiety, man. And there are many of us who are are unaware that this is happening, you know. And I think, you know, if one thing that I would hope that people would learn from this is, you know, that, you know, we do understand and that there is help and there are other ways, you know, and therapy is, you know, is something that you shouldn't be ashamed of. You know, it's one of the best investments that you can make for yourself, you know, and just to kind of show to them how deep you can go.
Absolutely.
You know, you come to see somebody like James for anxiety, and he's like, he doesn't, you know, we've got the word hypnotherapy in cognitive hypnotherapy. It's not something that he, you know, he hypnotizes you and then you just stop feeling anxious. It's a journey inside, you know. It's a journey within, and there's a lot of magic there, and there's a lot of amazing stuff there, man. Like you're there, you're in there, you know. That's where, isn't it? It's where we are inside, and sometimes we become unaware. We're unaware of that. And if there's one thing that I could hope to achieve through this, is for people to understand the actual power of overcoming these things.
That is beautiful. That is beautiful.
You know,
I love it. I love what you're doing here, and I agree with everything you just said.
and you know, I
Yeah.
think, you know, with me and you, you know, one thing that we've got in common is one of our greatest qualifications is our experience, our personal experience with these things, with addiction, with anxiety, and with therapy, actually, because we've been through it, and we're aware of, you know, what happens when you go to therapy, you know.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
especially cognitive hypnotherapy, because it's you know, it's such a big thing, isn't it? It's you know,
Absolutely.
there are you know, there's so much to it that can help.
Yes.
You know, it you know, it fits everyone, and there's no one that comes that doesn't get something from it.
Exactly. Exactly that. You know, um, I I mean, I just agree with everything you just said. It's what better thing is there in life than what could be better than looking inwards and setting yourself free of past limitations and
Yeah, yeah,
discovering your true self.
that's it,
I
man. I
mean,
think if there was ever a meaning to life, it's to discover yourself in that way, because it leads to so many things, you know. It's kind of, you know, it's, I used to be an atheist, you know, and it's led me to spirituality, you know. And I think you're, you know, you might be going through something similar at the moment, you know. And it's just, it is, it happens through looking, because when you look inside and when you overcome these things, you know, it's like a journey of self-connection, self-acceptance, self-forgiveness, you know, which leads to self-love. And, you know, it's this self-love that kind of opens you up, whether you like it or not, whether you're expecting it or not, to some kind of spiritual experience, you know, whether that's religious or just to the universe, or whatever you want to call it, you know. And, you know, if there was ever a meaning to life, whether, even if you're religious, your meaning to life, meaning for life is to connect with God, you know, then it happens through finding yourself, connecting with yourself first,
absolutely.
you know.
Absolutely. I mean, again, I just agree completely. Therapy of any kind, along with many, many spiritual practices,
Especially cognitive hypnotherapy.
especially cognitive hypnotherapy. Yeah, I mean, they're pointing in the same direction, which is what you just outlined.
Yeah,
Your well-being, finding an inner well-being.
yeah,
You know, like it is the ultimate journey. Yes, I get it. So if you're listening and your main concern is anxiety and addiction, you know, that's your entry point.
yeah,
That's the entry point, and that's
exactly.
fine. And that's good, right? That's good, because the thing is, you know, we start somewhere. I wouldn't be on this path right now if I didn't have anxiety.
Yeah,
Okay, like our problems hide our gifts and opportunities for becoming our best selves.
yeah,
It's only because I had anxiety that I'm even here, let alone have fostered any level of
yeah,
insight.
yeah,
There's an alternate universe where I am, you know, in the middle of a busy career somewhere, and by others, you know, by some measures in society, might be viewed as doing really well. But you know, I know from where I've been that actually I needed anxiety, because anxiety was like an alarm bell that was going off to say, hey, there's thought and emotion going on here that
yeah,
needs to be resolved. There are
yeah,
things within you which haven't, which need your attention. And so anxiety was a thing that I needed to happen, and is why it was happening, to draw me inwards for this kind of journey.
yeah,
If you have addiction, anxiety, depression, whatever you're struggling with, it's your entry point.
yeah,
It's fine for you to begin focused on overcoming that. But what you'll find is that the journey of overcoming those things merges seamlessly into what Dennis is describing, which is that lifelong, this beautiful journey of self-discovery and ever greater well-being. And
mhm.
that I am, I guess you too, will be on for our lives, like the rest of our lives. And
I
it'll be a
hope it
pleasure to
never
do so.
ends.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hope it never ends. Sometimes it's rocky, sometimes it can be difficult, but again, it's, you know, we spoke about this before, you know, what a privilege
Yeah.
to be, you know, dealing with problems like that. You know, these are, you know, these are good quality problems,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They're good
Yeah.
problems. And yeah, and I think it's a fantastic investment. And yeah, with that, man, I just want to thank you for coming. And I feel like as much as we've spoken, I know I can't keep you all day. As much as we've spoken, I feel like we've sort of only scratched the surface of all the things that we can talk about.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
And you know, if you're free again one day, man,
Brilliant.
maybe we can do this again.
It'd be
Maybe,
my pleasure.
yeah, maybe you're listening and you feel like a question that you might have had wasn't covered. If you feel that way, man, you know, message me or put it in the comments, and we'll see if we can get James on again and ask him those questions. If you're happy to do that,
I'd be very happy. Yeah.
And if you want to talk to James, yeah, his details will be in the comment in the description. There there'll be access to his website. I think, have you got an ebook as well on your website?
I've got an ebook. Yeah, we can do a link to that as well.
It's a free ebook, isn't it?
That's right. That's
yeah.
right.
So if you go onto James's website, you can find that. It's about anxiety.
That's right.
Yeah.
In fact, yeah, it's about thought and so on. It'll pick up right from this conversation.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah. So all that information will be there for you as well. One last question. Book recommendation.
Ooh, all right. Wow.
Just one.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Is this for anxiety or anything?
I think anxiety will be a good one, but I mean, you know, we've covered so much about the process of thinking.
Yeah.
That's,
okay. All right. Just one.
I've got an idea of which one you're going to go for.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's so many good ones, but actually, I'll recommend. The Obstacle is the Way. I'm going to recommend The Obstacle is the Way. Yeah, because whatever your obstacle is, whatever it is exactly that you're facing, The Obstacle is the Way. And that book can give you that can help you foster the courage that you need to move forward. And it will lead to this journey of growth that we've been chatting about.
That's today. A great recommendation. I have to say, The Obstacle is the Way. I've read that 3 times, and it is probably one of the most important books that I've ever read.
There you go. There you go.
So yeah, definitely recommend that. Ryan Holiday.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah.
Brilliant, mate.
Lovely. James, thank you so much for coming on. And I hope to do this again with you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Dennis. And yeah, I look forward to next time.
Yeah. You're my first ever one as well. So
brilliant. Brilliant. It's an honor. It's a real honor.
The honor's ours, man. Thank you for coming on. You've been a great help, and you know, I hope everyone's benefited from this as well, as I'm sure they will have. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone.